Hey, Yugi nerds, it's Andrew again. I was just talking about my fires and how I just sit back, make this field, and watch the world burn. But anyway, time to get back to old favorite, my favorite, Skull Servant deck.
Oh.
So, as usual, just run 3 Skull Servants.
Nope.
Perfect play.
Don't play it in there.
Just perfect thing to have. Just summon Skull Servant, you're fine.
It's just a vanilla, though.
Yeah, but I mean, Skull Servant, yeah, best play. But to make up for the Skull Servant, you guys know King of the Skull Servant. You know his effect. Do you guys need me to explain it again?
Probably not.
Cool. Just he gains 1,000 of attack and just beats over everything. To help support King, he has his daughter, the White Princess. Just the only hand trap I run in this deck. You discard her, lower each monster's attack and defense by 300 for their level. It's not as strong as it used to be with Link monsters now, but it still targets the majority of the opponent's monsters. And again, it puts a White Princess in the graveyard. And she counts as a Skull Servant in the graveyard, adding another 1,000 to King's attack. Additionally, when she's normal summoned, you get to send a White Prince to the graveyard, and I'll get to him later on. But she is, in my opinion, the second best Skull Servant or White Archetype monster in this deck. And it's white as in bone, W-I-G-H-T. Just want to clarify for everyone out there. Next up is the Lady in White. She's really good for a defense position monster. Level 3, 22 defense, really good. When she's on the field, all monsters all zombie monsters on my field of level 3 or lower cannot be targeted by spells or traps. So that's really nice. She has a few other ways to get on the field that are useful. Again, counts as a Skull Servant in the graveyard, adding another 1,000 to the King's attack. She's really good. Yeah. Next up is the King's Son, White Prince. Most of the monsters in this deck are going to be 3 of. But he is really good because you can send him to the graveyard. And it sends a Lady in White and a Skull Servant to the graveyard. Additionally, you can banish him from the graveyard with a Skull Servant, or 2 of them, and a Lady in White, and special summon a King from your deck. So that's really useful if you haven't drawn into a King. And you have ways to get him back into the graveyard with some spell cards in this deck. But he's really good. You can, Link summon him away, as I'll get to later, but he's really good to just open up with. Next up is, I think, the last on the White Archetype, Whitemare. He's really good if your King's been banished, because then you just discard him, special summon your King back. It's really good if a Lady in White's banished, because you can discard him and special summon her, preferably in defense position. And then you can also banish him to return a Whitemare or a Skull Servant that's been banished to the graveyard. So he's really nice to just return stuff, special summon stuff, all around decent card. Next up are the Guardians. Well, actually, no. Next up is the other King in the deck, Doom King. He came out pretty recently, really good. Whenever a zombie monster's effect is activated, he has 2 effects he can do in response: negate the zombie monster's effect, or a non-target banish of another monster on the field. It doesn't have to be a zombie, it can just banish anything.
It's a very good card.
Yeah, and again, doesn't target, so he's really good in this kind of format. So yeah, he's decent. I try to get him out as soon as possible. I really prefer having him and a King out at the same time, just for perfect cover. But next up are the Guardians, who can special summon stuff. I run 3 Mizukis. Just try to get them in the graveyard to special summon stuff that's been destroyed. He's really good. Sometimes if your opponent's attack monsters aren't that strong yet, just summon him and attack. Hopefully they live. If not, they're sent to the graveyard and do further work. And I think these are the last 2 monsters. I run 2 Unizombies, perfect for sending monsters to the graveyard, and their tuner, and I run a few synchro monsters in this deck, because I haven't gotten rid of these older formats of special summon extra deck monsters, so yeah, he's really good. One downside is that if you activate his second effect, which is sending a zombie monster from your graveyard from your deck to the graveyard, only zombie monsters can attack, but all the monsters in my deck are zombies, so it doesn't really matter too much.
Right.
But he's really good to just get out on the field pretty early on and use his effect to send stuff to the graveyard. Next up this deck would not run very well without it. I run 2 zombie worlds. I would run 3, but because of the terraforming and metaverse hit, I don't really run 3 because they're also just kind of bricking this deck.
Right.
But they're good for limiting your opponent's tribute summons, and again, as everyone knows, turns all the monsters on the field to a zombie type monster. So it's really good, like when Jacob is playing a hero deck and he needs to banish stuff from his graveyard. For when he needs to banish stuff to the graveyard to add a equip spell to his hand, and it's like, wait a second, you need 2 warrior monsters. They're zombies now, and he's like, shoot.
Yeah.
And then I somehow win, which confuses me so much. But hey. Next up, I run 2 Burial from a Different Dimension. Just perfect way to return banished monsters back to the graveyard.
Right.
Just useful card all around. Next up, I only run 2 of these, but 2 Twin Twisters. I used to run 3, but eventually having the 3rd one just is kind of a brick because they all destroy 2 spell cards or 2 spell and trap cards. So they're useful. I don't really think you need 3, but the 2 really works.
Right.
And again, you get to discard a monster or just a card with its effect. It's a perfect way to send stuff to the graveyard. Next up, people are going to judge me kind of, but I run 2 Where Art Thou? It allows you to add a level 1 monster from your deck to your hand, as long as you have a level 1 monster on the field. So if you can somehow get a level 1 monster without normal summoning, just add, or play this, add like, let's say a king to your hand, you can normal summon him. However, if you already have normal summoned and you use this effect, you take 2,000 life point damage. So that's kind of a downside to it, but sometimes with this deck, your monsters are so high where the damage doesn't really matter. Next, I used to run 3 of these, but I only run 1 Polymerization. Just perfect way to get a fusion monster to help support my monsters in this deck. Just great to send stuff to the graveyard as well, because all zombie decks need stuff in the graveyard.
Right.
Next is the coveted 1-for-1. Send a monster from your hand to the graveyard, special summon a level 1 monster, and my main card in this deck is going to be King, so I'll just use this to special summon a King. Hopefully he's high enough to beat over my opponents. Next, I run 1 Book of Life. Perfect if I have like a zombie world on the field or I'm playing a mirror match, because then I can special summon a zombie monster from my graveyard and banish a zombie monster from my opponent's graveyard.
Nice.
So that's a really nice effect. I'm just going to pull out all of my draw power. I run 1 of each of these. I could run more Allure of Darkness, but again, it's kind of a brick. If I've already drawn all my monsters, it just sends everything to the graveyard, so that's kind of bad.
Right.
But it's really good if I know I can use it. If I know I can like banish a king and then discard a Nightmare to special summon him back. So that's really useful. Upstart Goblin, your monsters are going to be high enough anyway. So it doesn't matter that your opponent gets another 1,000 life points. And then Card Destruction, really good if you have a big hand. You can just discard your entire hand, draw the same amount. Draw power is very important for this deck, as well as growing the graveyard. So that's really nice. Next up are my 2 traps. I run a Storming Mirror Force because it's just nice to send stuff to back to the opponent's hand or whatever. It annoys some people. It's really fun. I recommend using it. And then I also run a Breakthrough Skill just for if you need to negate an opponent's effect. It works both the first time on the field, and then you can banish it from your graveyard and negate another monster's effect, so that's really good. Next is the extra deck. I run a Link Karibo because, say I open with just a White Prince, I can normal summon the White Prince, link it away, summon a Link Karibo, and then the White Prince's effect goes off, which adds stuff to the graveyard, so that's really nice. I also run 1 Vampire Sucker just for draw power, pretty much. I never actually have used her yet, but she's nice. Yeah. And then my favorite XYZ monster that I've never summoned ever in this duel that everyone laughs at, Baby Terragon.
Best card.
Best card. The main point of this deck was formed when I'm like, I'm going to make a deck that uses this card. It allows a level 1 monster to attack your opponent directly. You just have to remove an XYZ material. Next up is probably the best, or rank 1 XYZ, and that is Utopia Roots. You can just negate an opponent's attack just by removing a material, and it gains attack and defense based on your opponent's, if your opponent attacks with an XYZ. So he's really good just for stalling for time as well. Again, adds stuff to the graveyard. This one's kind of harder to get out, but he's nice. I run 1 Castell. Just really great for sending stuff back, or destroying stuff, sending stuff back to the deck. Just nice to have. Next is, I'm going to do Black Rose Dragon, just for when you need to nuke the field.
Right.
Just standard for this deck because send stuff to the graveyard. Don't really need him, but I run 1 Red Dragon Archfiend. Just nice beat, send stuff to the graveyard. You run 2 Unazombie with this deck, so he's a tad easier to get out. And Unazombie raises levels and whatnot, so it's useful, even with lower leveled monsters in this deck, but it's possible. Next, I run 3 Red-Eye Zombie Drago Necro Dragons, I think. No. Red-Eye Zombie Necro Dragon. Thinking of another card. But he gains 100 attack for each zombie monster in the graveyard. Just nice to synchro summon out and have a simple beat stick that starts at 24 attack.
Nice.
And if you're using any of the monsters in this deck, they're going to be zombies, so he's going to gain like 200, at least 200 more. My fusion monsters have kind of dwindled because I only run 1 now. But I have 2 Drago Necro Nether Soul Dragons. Perfect if you want just a beating token. Sadly, I take damage if I attack something too high, but their monster's attack will go down to 0, and I'll get a token with the monster's original attack. So he's nice, just a nice way to fusion summon stuff out, build your graveyard. And finally, I'm a little old school, so I run Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. Requires 2 dark monsters on the field, but he's just nice for like stealing effects and attacks and whatnot. It's a nice card to have in this deck. But most often, your main monsters you're going to use are in your main deck. And I'm weird, so I have 1 single card in my side deck, and that's just a Monster Reborn. And that's
Wild.
just, if my opponents are always targeting my monsters and like preventing me from special summoning from the graveyard, just a nice way to change it up and be like, you're stupid, why?
Right.
It just confuses my opponents, and just a nice way to do it. But yeah, primarily with this deck, you're going to want your king out on the field. You might want your Doom King on the field, but you will want your graveyard filled with all of the Skull Servant and White Archetype monsters in the graveyard.
Cool. So is there anything you change with this deck?
This deck, not really. It's kind of just nice, simple, straightforward. I'd say much more straightforward than like Deskbot or like Salad or any of these new meta decks. Again, I duel mostly just like for fun. I don't really care about big dueling zones or areas, stuff like that. Just nice. And if I'm playing with my friends, they don't target me because they're like, hey, he's just playing King. King doesn't do anything. So they save me for last, and then I end up winning because I have a King like 12,000 attack.
Right.
But yeah, if you have any questions, any comments, any things you'd ask why I have it, or just anything you'd like to change, or anything, just leave a review and I'll get back to you.
All right.
Peace out.
Thank you, and we'll see you in the next video.